Hey, the signal seems to be working pretty good up here. Try a different angle on our project so we can understand better. I usually start this down at the pond. As you can see though, there is another pond on this project right there. I don't know, can I zoom it? Yeah, there we go. So that is a secondary pond compared to the first pond, which is on down the hill by that dock. That's the primary pond that I've been managing. What's up, Tattoo Man? Taking a little bit different angle on the pond project here so we can get a full idea of what's going on. As you can see, and I'm not even going to insult these men who are growing these plants, there's different types of trees growing up here, uphill from the pond, and there's several varieties. Hardwood trees, there's deer like to rub on them. You see that? I think that's what happened to that one. But as you can see, see the black piping here. Merry Christmas, Midwest, man. Welcome aboard, man. Just walking through the field up here, these trees, because this is a landscape architecture business, SugarHill Outdoors. All the shrubs and plants and things that they grow here are, native and for going into the, people's yards in the environment around here, and they grow them so they can save money and make money. And so I just wanted to walk around out here and show y'all the fields. And actually, this isn't the only fields either. If you go all the way across over there, that light color area, it's kind of like this light color area. There's stuff going in up there as well. And as you can see, more piping, and all this piping, there's actually two forms. Here, we'll get where we can kind of see it here. Sorry about the camera work. I'm trying to manage this thing too and doing a bad job. Tuck it under my arm. All right, so one of the pipe system deal, and I know very little about it, but down there along the dam, way down along the other side of the dam, there is a gravity-fed pipe. The water just comes in out of the pond and feeds that with gravity, and that primes a pump, I think, that pumps water up. And there's also a secondary pump. I think it's somewhere out around the middle of the lake, but I'm not positive. And it's just a regular pump. So in case they have two different ways to get water from the lake up here to the, I guess what we'll call pasture. And they also have a pump back system where any excess water can be pumped and held in this other little storage lake here. Sometimes it dries out. We're trying to figure out a way to use this environmentally friendly and irrigation friendly. But so this is an irrigation system primarily. And so what's cool about it is then Clint was smart enough to know that he could do pond science in there and use a pond that's normally used for irrigation and also have good fishing. Again, we do have the feeder, and I've caught some static about feeding the fish. And on that front, I will say that the feeder is bringing the fish population in the ponds up to a high normal level. Right now, if we just left it alone, we could have perfectly good fishing and manage it without feeding it, but the fish population density would be lower, much lower, at a low normal level. We're not operating outside of the realm of what the pond can handle, or trying to grow fish at maximum production or anything. We're just boosting it to the point where we can safely And secondarily, the feed, like I said, the water is being recycled. This water is not being released back downhill. This is a unique situation that way, in that any nutrients that the pond builds up gets redistributed on the field before it ever goes back down through into the, off the property and into the aquifers and everything. So it's a really efficient use of a corporate or business situation, I guess. And the secondary benefit that we get from it is that Clint's very generous, and he does allow young people to fish, and he allowed me to stock 2 different species of bass, subspecies, I guess, Florida bass and northern bass in the same pond. We're tracking different genetics in there, and I don't know, we've just kind of made this little irrigation pond as environmentally friendly and fish production wise as productive as it could be, and also use it as a genetics experiment. So I don't know, I think that's pretty cool. Problem we're having with this one is it doesn't rain enough. Sometimes we have little large periods of light to no rain, and the pond stays full just fine, but it's this secondary irrigation kind of pump back pond that sometimes we're having troubles with keeping some water in there. But as you can see, any extra water that comes off the field goes right back into the pump back pond. So it's really efficient use of a natural resource in a really intelligent way. Kudos to SugarHill Outdoors and Clint Tucker. And here, we'll get around so we can see his sign. Do some shameless advertising. Might as well, man, because we need more companies like this guy, man, for sure. He really likes to fish and cares about the environment, and did a really good job listening, which is sometimes really hard to find. Somebody who will kind of just listen and let you do your job without any outside influence. Walk down to the pond, check it out. It's a little muddy, we got some rain. It's important to understand the difference between turbidity from mud and silt. To understand what's going on in Georgia with the productivity of the water, though, you can understand the history a little bit. Helps. So several hundred years, 400 years ago, Georgia had beautiful, dark, rich soil like Iowa, 8 feet thick, and they cut all the trees in a bad way. They didn't understand forestry practices at all back then, and it caused a lot of runoff, and it took all our dark, beautiful soil to the Atlantic Ocean or the Gulf, and it's all gone, and we're left with this clay level through many parts of Georgia. Is all just this, you'll see it very clearly here, Georgia red clay, and like this, very much like this. So the clay's good for building ponds, but it's not good for growing things. And that's why we have to add things like lime and manage our plant populations, get certain types of plant growth and different types of soils. I'm going to set this camera down and scroll through questions. I'm sure there's a few by now. Oh yeah, and we can check out the sign. That's why we came down here. These guys are cool, man. If you need any hardscape, landscape, even pond, they built this pond. Did a great job with it. And we're growing some great big fish in it. All right, let's check out our questions. Mainstream, what's up, man? Yeah, it's foggy and cool out today for sure. Malone, Merry Christmas, everyone. Merry Christmas, Frank. Thanks for joining, man. The screen's kind of wet, so my thumb's not working. All right, I don't see too many. I did see one about the, seems like the feed's working. Oh, Midwest got a good question about, making publications. Yeah, man, that's the thing. We'd probably need to, I don't know. I've never seen anybody get any kind of, published work on one pond. You'd have to do it several times, measure it several times, measure it in a lot more depth than we're measuring now, for sure, too. We are going to run an electrofishing survey out here in the spring, and I'll be interviewing the kid doing that. He's a young guy getting going, and got a few places we can electrofish, and we can talk a little bit about that. I'm not doing that kind of work anymore. I don't want to. Ooh-wee, there was a nice rolling right there. You get a rod, it might be biting in this rain. But anyway, I can say though, even though maybe I can't prove everything completely scientifically, I do have observations that back up everything that we've seen here, many of them, many times. Kind of knew what to expect before it happened type of situation. And if you just kind of go with that, you can get a long way. A few more pond jobs, especially with the way the genetics are. The one major difference, the one thing that makes this a unicorn here, I'll flip it around and walk so you don't have to look at me this whole time. The one thing that makes this place a real unicorn are the bass genetics. Since we're able to differentiate between northern and Florida, because there's really no other way to do it, like physically, that I'm aware of, by just looking at the fish. Without having the pit tags, I can't tell. But this way I can tell, and we've already seen what I expected. Some of the northern fish have been captured 5, 6. I think one of them been caught 8 times. The northern fish are a lot more aggressive and bite a lot more, and some of the Florida bass have never been caught. Actually, probably a significant portion. I bet probably between 30 and 40% of the Florida bass haven't even bit a hook yet. And the way you get them to bite generally is on live bait or a couple select different types of lures. Jerk baits, they tend to bite those a little bit better. They tend to bite the speed worm a little bit better. Rat trap a little bit better. Very similar to the Florida bass that I'm fishing for in Florida where I live now. You can almost just take those lures that I just called and throw them in Florida. Like, they're very specific to certain lures and certain colors too, but certain colors of those particular lures as well. Anyway, that's just patterns that I've noticed. Like I said, they've been pretty consistent. I always like stocking the F1 bass over any other genetics, but this little project is an attempt to get F1s born in. We have seen some little schools of bass swimming around here in probably like the 7, 8, 9 inch length. And from what I know about F1s, especially with the genetics of these particular fish, because these northern fish here are freaks. They're exceptionally aggressive. They're different kind. I can tell it in the northern more than in the Florida, but touching back on the genetics of these fish, these guys take genetic markers of the individual fish. They aren't just taking a big bass and getting eggs and breeding it with another big bass. They're literally like looking at genetic markers and length, aggressiveness. I can't remember, there's 3 or 4 things, 5 things they look for, genetic markers. And then they look for, a male. They look for the best crosses between male and female for each fish's genetic markers. There's 2 fish right there. I think those might be grass carp though. So anyway, the genetics on these fish are like kind of on a different level than what I'm accustomed to messing with. And so the reproduction of those genetic freaks is what really interests me more than what these fish even do as far as their maximum growth rates go. I've kind of done this before with initial growth rates, lots of smalls. As you guys see those small fish, it's a good sign to see a diversity of size of fish through the winter time. Even if it's just a few is good. Diversity of size wins the prize, boys. When your pond starts losing diversity of all the fish, you know, diversity in sunfish, diversity of size in bass, that's a sign of health. When you start getting fish all one size, that's a sign there's a problem. Good little mud kind of flow coming in down this road, you see. The little fine particulate matter that makes that cloudy water is what changes the color. And that fine particulate matter actually can drift over if it gets bad. This isn't bad, but if it gets bad and does a real bad job, I know you've seen that, it affects the reproductive success of eggs, because that it covers the eggs and it doesn't allow them to get oxygen and kills the fish before they're ever born. It's one way turbidity can be very bad. Know what I mean? Es no bueno. Uh-oh. I'm gonna have to do some trash pickup down through here. Oh, got questions coming through too. Let's see. Oh, I already answered that one. Good. See, Frank, it's not cold here, man. I got this hoodie on. That's it, man. It's all right. Come south for the winter and get out of that tundra. Look, there's fish swimming around. I might still catch some today. It's always bass season in Georgia. They're not always biting, but it's always bass season. So anyway, yeah, I'm trying to get some footage so I can do some of this a little bit more in depth, talking about the pond ecology. Oh, and speaking of the pond ecology, we might as well talk about that now. Flipping Kicks, what's up, my man? Yeah, I know, it does look like milk, doesn't it? Yeah, that does happen. So, what we got going is, yeah, we do have some feed going in. And yeah, that does mean the fish use the bathroom a bit more because they're being fed artificially. But what that doesn't mean is all the droppings from those fish are going down to the bottom and sitting there and festering and filling the pond up with feces. That's not what that means at all. Because there's another food web that we haven't really touched on very well, but we might as well. Those droppings go down to the bottom, and actually we've got gravel all down in there. So they would sift down into that gravel, and that gravel creates a surface area for bacteria to grow on. So the bacteria in the gravel grows at a much higher density than it normally would because of the artificial feed. But we're smart enough not to throw too much artificial feed. We can't overrun the system with it. We're not doing that. It's a measured deal every day. It gets a certain amount. So what happens then is that bacteria down in that gravel, much like an aquarium, it gets thick and healthy. And there's aquatic insects that go around and scrape on that bacteria. Crawfish is one of them, and a bunch more too. But that increase in the bacteria in the gravel then increases the crawfish and the aquatic insects that live on the bottom. Those aquatic insects, primary forage, are these bluegill that we're feeding. So it creates this kind of a cycle within a cycle of increasing the benthic invertebrate population. And like I said, we're not going crazy, we're not throwing too much, we're not overrunning the system with nutrients, because we have to be careful because we're using this pond as irrigation. But I can promise you though, a pond that's productive in fish is very good irrigation water. Fish, and we use the dead fish that we get every once in a while. Sometimes a few fish die, or you snag one or whatever. You can make that into fish emulsion fertilizer, and that stuff works awesome. best fertilizer you can use, I think. I'm not a fertilizer expert, but I've seen some really nice stuff grow on fish emulsion for sure. What do we got today? 9 people. Man, this show is a banger. It's a pond show, man. And it's fun. I like working on ponds. Got a few more ponds coming along the line too. Got to go next week, heading back down to Florida to Crystal River. Got a little 10-acre private pit pond down there. Got to take a look at. Maybe a couple more on that property. Flipping Kicks was on here. He's got a pond just a couple miles west of here, and he's coming along starting in the springtime. Not too much we can do out there in ponds in the wintertime. We're kind of in relaxed mode. I'm just trying to get some footage to make some YouTube videos to clarify our positions on nutrient loading and fish growth and fish productivity and those kinds of ideas. And but year 3 is going to be awesome. Year 3 out here, guys. I'm telling you. Now we're getting into the serious time when the bass really get big and strong. They also get really smart too and hard to catch, so it's kind of a challenge too. But yeah, this little pond is going to have some nice bass in it, and it'll produce nice bass for several years as long as we manage it right. Usually the better part of a decade. And it's a really pretty spot, and it's a really interesting project, probably the most interesting project I've ever had, and I've just been lucky enough to know just enough about cameras and stuff now that I could record it and do a halfway good job maybe documenting this. And for any of the 9, 6, 4 people left, whatever, I like going live because you can't edit live. It seems to help with, credibility and I don't know about credibility is the right word, but at least documenting things in real time in a way that, you don't have to worry about saying, oh, it was edited this way or that way or whatever. So we got some kind of pump system here doing something. I don't get involved with those things anymore. I just like messing with fish. Anyway, one more advertisement for Clint and then I'll get off. Phone's about to die anyway. Oh yeah, Flippin's coming in. He says he's got live scope. He's ready for Christmas tree collection. Oh good, yeah. Sink you some Christmas trees out there about that 8-foot section. What's Frank in aquariums? Yeah, Frank, you got that one right. Good call, brother. Frank was asking about how the nitrates are consumed it's different. It's slightly different in aquariums as it is to ponds. Like I said, you can overrun it just like you can in an aquarium, but you have a little bit more margin of error in a pond because you do have a way more complex bacterial structure down in that detritus. And like I said, we were aware of how the pond was going to be fed and managed when we built it. So I made sure to keep things with lots of surface area. Smooth bottom isn't good. When you have surface area for bacteria to grow on, you got it made. And that usually comes in the form of rocks or wood. And we have plenty of both. We kept our gravel beds fluffed up on geofabric so they don't get mired in the mud. There's some rock piles. there's more wood in there. It's kind of a hassle right now. The wood, in 4 or 5 more years, it'll rot down and not be so snaggy. Right now it's kind of snaggy, but again, all that bacteria, all that surface area that those types of habitat provide is valuable surface area because we don't have aquatic plants. We don't want aquatic plants, and that's where people get lost, is like, oh, you have to have aquatic plants to have a healthy pond. Not really. You have to have habitat to have a healthy pond. You don't really want it like a cereal bowl, you know, but without plants, and especially in a small pond like this, especially where we're putting extra nitrates, extra phosphorus in the feed and things like that, that would be fuel for plants that we don't want, primarily because it clogs up the irrigation pumps that pump up to the field to keep the crops alive. But secondarily, and equally as beneficially, we're allowed to use grass carp in Georgia. I've used grass carp in this way for years, for apartment complex ponds, for homeowners association ponds, private ponds all over Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina. It's all legal to use grass carp there as well. And just like, it's kind of like using like goats to, instead of mowing your fields, or cows instead of mowing your fields, you stock a vegetarian fish and they eat the plants that we would otherwise have to treat with a product. Or because that's the other part people don't understand. If you let plants overgrow the pond, it kills the fish anyway. Plants are alive in the water too, and they can use up all the oxygen and really mess things up for your smaller ponds. And I'll flip it around again and check for any questions, in case anybody has any questions about that. So kind of back to the point about the habitat though, there's the trees there. There's trees that have been cut down there. All these trees are back in this lake, in this water, laying down along this ledge, coming down to a creek channel where there was rock lined creek channel, and also sticks and stumps and everything along those lines. So there's absolutely plenty of habitat here for everything in the system, and it was designed that way. There is just very, very little plant growth in the pond. And again, that's intentional. I don't want it clogging my irrigation. And I also don't want it robbing my plankton, because I have plankton out here, and that's the base of the food chain in the pond. So if I can kind of shift the nutrients that I do have towards plankton, it's more productive water, which means it's more pounds of fish per acre. Now, maybe someplace where there's so much nutrients coming in, like the Midwest, that the pond water is pea soup green all the time, and it's battling, too much plankton and oxygen levels that way. That's when these types of plants become crucial, and you'll see them ringing the ponds and bringing plants in, because they're fighting a battle on the other end of the spectrum. They're fighting too much nutrients, where I'm kind of fighting not enough. And that's why it's really important to have a local biologist to help you with your local pond issues, because it matters. It matters a great deal. Every pond's a little different. And I'm going to get my foot wet, but that's okay. I'm going to step out here, try to not get soaking. All right, we got a little bit of feed left, but watch, it's probably not going to do much going to happen. Oh, we did get a little bit of a feed in there. So it's high 50s. They're actually pretty active still. But what's happening is the water temperatures are cooling down, and they're not feeding nearly as actively as the piranhas they normally look like. And that's because their metabolisms are slowing down, their bodies are slowing down. And it'll get to the point once this water cools off just a few more degrees, and it's just kind of been abnormally warm, really, or they would have quit already. But we don't have to feed our fish all winter time. their bodies don't need it and won't process it, and like I said, they'll eventually quit. And we can shut the feeding program down until the water temperatures go above 60 degrees next spring. Their metabolism's so slow that just the natural insects and stuff in the pond is plenty for them. All right, I'm gonna double check for questions. Make sure I'm not missing anyone. Yes, it is. Cool and foggy. Rich, what's up, my friend? JP, welcome aboard, everyone. All right, boys, I don't see any more questions. Bluegill aren't even hardly feeding. Wrapping up the second full growing season out here at the pond, and I'd say it's very successful. 4-1 is the biggest bass we've measured to date. And we'll have an electrofishing survey going out here this spring. Got a kid coming on. Did a talk with Texas A&M Fisheries a couple of years ago. You guys that have followed along a while probably saw it. Saw the ad for it anyway a year or two back for A&M AFS meeting. And one of the kids on there, Garrett, he started a pond business, not much different than the one that I've got going, halfway going anymore anyway. And so he's got a shock boat, and he's going to do some shocking out here. And we're going to... I like that idea of having somebody else do the survey. It's less bias, I guess, than if I were to do the survey. You can double check my work, and maybe from his perspective, he'll see something that I'm not seeing, It's entirely possible. So it'll get a little more scientific this year, boys. We're going to step off into electrofishing boats and water quality, more in-depth water quality stuff about hardness and how it works, alkalinity, how it works, some of the challenges we've had here with it recently, and how we're going to correct that. You guys are funny, man. Anyway, I don't know. Can you get dinged for saying Merry Christmas on YouTube? Better say Happy Holidays and Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah. Whatever it is, however you get down, man. Appreciate you guys watching, and enjoy your families and your times off. And thanks for watching and all the positive engagement. And I'm heading back to Florida. So I'll be back on in about a week. Appreciate it.